Before we begin, please be advised that this episode contains references to the disappearance of two young children and touches on themes of grief and long-term injustice. Listener discretion is advised. It was just after midnight in the city of Prince George, British Columbia. The lights were still on in a small home on Strathcona Avenue. Inside, a young mother, Doreen Jack, and a young father, Ronnie Jack, gathered their things. Their two children, Russell, age 9, and Ryan, age 4, were tucked close. A man waited outside. Ronnie picked up the phone and called his mother, Mabel Jack. "We're heading out," he said. "We'll be gone for about 2 weeks. If I don't come back, you look for me between Vanderhoof and Lake." Then the line went dead. The family stepped out the door and into history. Because from that moment on, not a single trace of them has ever been found. No arrests, no remains, no answers, just silence. For over 3 decades. This is Northern Dark, true Canadian crime. Tonight, we return to August 2nd, 1989, the night the Jack family vanished. It was late on the night of August 1st, 1989. Inside their small home on Strathcona Avenue in Prince George, the Jack family was preparing for something that had come together quickly, a sudden opportunity, maybe even a fresh start. Ronnie Jack was 26 years old. He'd been struggling to get back on his feet after a back injury sidelined him from his job at the Cheslada sawmill. Work was scarce. He and his wife Doreen, also 26, had moved their family from BujoldLake to Prince George looking for better chances. She stayed home with their 2 sons, 9-year-old Russell and Ryan, just 4. That night, Ronnie had received a phone call from a man offering jobs at a logging camp. Ronnie could work as a bucker cutting felled trees into more manageable lengths. Doreen would cook in the kitchen for the men working at the lumber mill. The man said there'd be room for the whole family, with schooling for Russell and daycare for Ryan. The opportunity was too good to miss, and as good parents, they wanted to do what was best for their family. It all sounded promising, quick money, a way forward. But Mabel Jack, Ronnie's mother, had her doubts. She later told reporters that something felt off. Her son called her around 1:30 a.m. sharing the plan. She recalled how calm he sounded. But still, she worried. Ronnie wasn't the type to leave on a whim. She would later tell the BujoldLake Lakes District News, "All I want is to find them so I can have peace." He was a good father. He never would have put his kids in danger. At some point around midnight, a family member in the home saw a white man arrive. He was around 35 to 40 years old, medium build, wearing a red plaid shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap. He didn't speak much, just waited while the family packed up. Doreen was still playing with little Ryan when it was time to leave. She scooped him up and smiled. There was no sign of fear. A few minutes later, the front door closed behind them. The man's vehicle, described as a dark-colored pickup or van, pulled away with all 4 members of the Jack family inside. And just like that, they were gone. The next day, no one heard from them. No one ever would again. Before they became the subject of headlines and RCMP bulletins, the Jack family lived a quiet, hopeful life, shaped by love, hardship, and the search for something better. Ronnie and Doreen Jack were both 26 years old. They were members of the Tlaztlan Nation, part of British Columbia's vast Indigenous community, and proud of their roots. They came from BujoldLake, a small town several hours west of Prince George, where extended family and traditions helped anchor their lives. But like so many others in the North, they faced challenges, especially economic ones. Ronnie had recently suffered a back injury while working at a sawmill on the Cheslada Reserve. He was off work and looking for a way to provide again. Those who knew him described him as quiet, kind, and steady. A father who adored his boys and wanted to stand on his own feet again. Doreen was the heart of the household. She stayed home to care of their young sons Russell and Ryan. Her world revolved around her sons. Neighbors and family members described her as gentle, warm, and always smiling. She was deeply committed to her children's well-being. The family moved to Prince George not long before they disappeared. Like many Indigenous families in rural Canada, they hoped the city would offer more job options, more schooling, maybe even more safety. They settled into their home on Strathcona Avenue, a modest rented unit in a quiet neighborhood. Ronnie's mother would later say they had dreams of building a more stable life, one where the boys could thrive. They didn't have much, she told reporters, but they had each other. They were not people who made rash decisions. They were cautious, practical, grounded, and they were close to each other and to their extended family. That closeness is what made their sudden disappearance all the more unbelievable. No warnings, no goodbyes, just gone. In many ways, the Jack family was like thousands of others in northern British Columbia, navigating poverty, making the best of limited options, holding on to each other, trying always to move forward, even when the road was uneven. It's important to remember that before they were missing, they were here, laughing, working, raising children. They were loved, they are still loved.
When we look at this journey, it actually began early on.
August 1st, 1989. A phone rings inside the Jack family home. On the other end, a man introduces himself. He's friendly but vague. He says he has work, logging jobs, a camp cook position, space for the whole family, even daycare and school for the boys. The offer sounds sudden and strange, but for a young family like the Jacks, who had recently relocated to Prince George and were trying to rebuild after Ronnie's back injury, it didn't just sound hopeful, it sounded real. Ronnie took the call seriously. He believed the man. He even told his mother that the job was supposed to be at a ranch or logging camp near Klitkat Lake west of the city. He said the man had already offered to pick them up at home. At the time, Ronnie was receiving social assistance. There wasn't much money coming in. The promise of paid work, even short-term, might have felt like a lifeline. The man didn't give a company name, no location details, no paperwork. But he described the jobs clearly. Ronnie would be a bucker, and Doreen would be the cook. The kids would be looked after. It felt perfect. It felt organized. It felt rehearsed. It's important to note that the caller had details about their lives. He knew they had 2 children, and he came prepared with an offer that addressed all of their needs. This wasn't a cold call. It had intent. Shortly after that conversation, Ronnie called his mother back, sometime before 1:30 a.m. He told her they were heading out soon, that they'd be gone for 10 days to 2 weeks, that everything was fine. But the sense of urgency was unmistakable. There was no waiting until morning, no chance to double-check. The man was on his way. By all accounts, the Jacks believed this was legitimate. Ronnie even mentioned that the man had called back after the initial conversation, to confirm when he'd arrive. The timeline was precise. He was coming at 1:30 a.m. Why would anyone accept a job offer in the middle of the night from someone they barely knew? It's a question asked for decades. But for families like the Jacks, where opportunity was rare and trust was part of survival, there may not have been time or reason to question it. That decision would mark the last time the Jack family was ever heard from. It was sometime around midnight when a man arrived at the home of the Jack family on Strathcona Avenue. A relative of the family who had been visiting the home that night later reported seeing a white man standing quietly at the doorway. He was just waiting. The vehicle was parked outside. Witnesses later described it as a dark-colored four-wheel drive truck or van. Police would never find it, or the man who drove it. Inside, the Jack family moved quickly. They weren't panicked, just prepared. Ronnie and Doreen gathered clothes and necessities, packing light. Russell and Ryan were with them, sleepy but ready. Doreen was still playing with little Ryan when the moment came. She scooped him into her arms, smiled, and said, "Let's go." It was likely meant to be an adventure, a job in the woods, a break from the struggle, a family trip that promised structure and income, if only for a couple of weeks. Ronnie made one last phone call to his mother to reassure her. He told her they were heading out, that they'd be back in a couple of weeks, that everything had been arranged. Not to worry. He mentioned again that there would be a school for Russell, that Ryan would be looked after in a daycare, that Doreen's job was waiting in the kitchen. It was the last known contact anyone had with the family. By 1:30 a.m., the vehicle pulled away from the curb. It turned out of the neighborhood and into the darkness.
246, base.
246.
I'm looking at that vehicle now on Strand Street.
By the afternoon of August 2nd, 1989, family members were already worried. The Jack family hadn't called to check in. They hadn't arrived at any known work site, and they hadn't left a note behind. Police in Prince George were notified quickly, and an official missing persons investigation began almost immediately. At first, authorities treated it as a voluntary departure. After all, Ronnie had told his mother they'd be gone for a week or two. But within days, the story began to unravel. The logging camp the man claimed to represent, it couldn't be located. The employer, never identified. The vehicle, gone. The man who picked them up, still unknown to this day. Early police efforts included checking local roads and routes to Klitkat Lake and the Vanderhoof area, where the job was supposedly located. But no physical evidence turned up. No tire tracks, no receipts, no sightings of the truck. The family's social assistance checks were never cashed. There was no activity on their bank accounts. Their health cards were never used again. There were no withdrawals, no medical visits, no school enrollments. By the end of August, RCMP investigators publicly admitted what the family already feared. "All efforts to locate the family have failed so far," an officer told the Lake District News. For a family of 4 to vanish without a single trace, no paper trail, no noise, was unheard of. This wasn't just a missing persons file anymore. It was something else. Despite multiple appeals to the public, no one came forward. Not a single confirmed witness saw the family after they got into that truck. No driver stepped up to say it was a misunderstanding. No coworker said they arrived at camp. No neighbor said they'd returned. It was as if the family had been erased. In the coming weeks, the RCMP would broaden their search, but the silence only deepened. There were no items recovered from the home that suggested foul play. No break-in, no struggle. It was the kind of case that made even seasoned officers uneasy. 4 people, gone in one night, and absolutely no clue as to where or why.
There's nothing suspicious about it. Not seen it before. Code 4.
Okay, that's a copy. 226 or disregard.
The investigation into the disappearance of the Jack family stretched across years, jurisdictions, and generations. And yet, even with national broadcasts and forensic analysis, police never came close to solving it. After the initial weeks brought no results, the RCMP turned to public appeals. A Crime Stoppers reenactment was filmed in late 1990 and aired on CKPG TV. The scene showed a reenactment of the man arriving at the Jack home, the family packing, and their quiet departure. It was rebroadcast in 1992 in hopes that time might jog memories. But still, nothing. Then, in January 1995, more than 5 years after the family vanished, a chilling phone call came into the RCMP detachment in Vanderhoof. It was a man's voice, calm, direct. He said, "The Jack family are buried at the south end of Ranch." The name of the ranch was muffled. Police couldn't make it out. The call lasted less than 10 seconds. It was traced to a home in Stony Creek, where a party had taken place the night before. Officers had already visited the address earlier that day, completely unaware that it had been the source of the call. RCMP believed the tip was made in good faith, possibly by someone at the party who knew more than they were willing to say outright. But with the name of the ranch lost in the static, they couldn't act on it. They enlisted a linguistics professor from UBC to analyze the tape, hoping advanced audio tools might recover the lost word. But even with professional support, it was never identified. The people at the party, believed to be between 6 and 9 individuals, were interviewed. None could say who made the call. It remains one of the most compelling but frustrating leads in the case. "We are still very much seeking public help to solve this case," said RCMP Constable Jennifer Cooper, decades after the disappearance. "Even the smallest piece of information could be the missing puzzle piece." Despite this, no charges have ever been laid, no suspects publicly named, and no physical evidence has ever emerged. The logging camp, if it existed, was never identified. The vehicle used to pick up the family was never found. The man who offered the jobs was never confirmed. The file remains open, still active, but frozen in time. In 2018, on the 29th anniversary, RCMP released a rare public statement. "This case is one that has never been closed. We continue to follow up on any leads that come in. But for the Jack family's loved ones, it has never been enough." Decades have passed since the Jack family vanished. Yet for those left behind, their relatives, their community, and especially their mother, Mabel Jack, time hasn't brought closure, only questions. Ronnie, Doreen, Russell, and Ryan Jack were never declared deceased. They were never found. No remains, no possessions, no grave. In an interview nearly 30 years after their disappearance, Mabel Jack told a local newspaper, "All I want is to find them so I can have peace." She's spent over 3 decades putting up flyers, handing out posters, and urging the public to come forward. Her pain is not just a mother's heartbreak. It's the anguish of a family and a nation whose loved ones were lost, and then forgotten by the world. The silence has never been passive. It speaks volumes about the systems that failed them. The Jack family was Indigenous, and while no one can say exactly what happened to them, there is a deeper truth that surrounds their case. It didn't get the attention it deserved, not in 1989, not in the years that followed, and not in the national conversation until well after it was too late. Their case is now often included in discussions around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and systemic neglect of First Nations families across Canada. As writer Dani Bujold put it in her investigation, when Indigenous families go missing, urgency is too often replaced by indifference. It's a reality the Jack family lived firsthand. Early coverage was minimal, public attention was slow, and while RCMP made public appeals, the broader national press rarely followed up. This lack of urgency is something Mabel Jack has spoken about again and again. The feeling that if her son and his family had looked different, if they'd lived somewhere else, more people would have noticed. More people might have helped. And so, their memory lives on, not just as a tragedy, but as a symbol of who gets protected, who gets searched for, and whose stories are allowed to fade. But the Jacks haven't faded. Not here. Not with the community that remembers them. Not with the nation that still mourns them. And not with listeners like you. Even after 30 years of silence, someone out there knows something. Ronnie, Doreen, Russell, and Ryan Jack were last seen just after 1:30 a.m. on August 2, 1989, stepping into a dark four-wheel drive vehicle with a man who was never identified. No evidence, no arrests, no trace, for over 3 decades. Their disappearance is one of the most haunting in Canadian history, not just because of the mystery, but because of the silence that followed. I'm Mark.
And I'm Leah.
Thanks for staying with us through this episode of Northern Dark. The Vanishing of the Jack Family.
Mark, can I ask, when you first came across this case, what was it that stayed with you?
Honestly, it was how quiet it all was. I have never heard about this case before, researching it for the podcast. However, I guess it is part of the sad history of what has been described as the Highway of Tears and the lack of national attention when this family disappeared. As I read about this case online, I was expect there to be something, a clue, a witness, anything after all of these years. But there's just nothing. A family of 4 gets into a truck and disappears. And that's it.
It's hard to believe.
What moved you about this missing family?
It was that phone call. Ronnie calling his mom, saying they'd be gone for 2 weeks, that there was daycare for the kids. I just keep thinking about how much trust it would take to go along with something like that, and how desperate they probably were to make ends meet, to leave so late at night with 2 young children.
Yeah, it wasn't reckless. It was calculated in its own way. A father trying to provide, a mother trying to hold her family together. That offer probably felt like hope.
And that's what's so cruel about it. Whoever made that call knew exactly what to say. They knew the family had young children. They came prepared with details, daycare, school, kitchen work.
It wasn't random, it was targeted. And 35 years later, we still don't know who that man was.
But the file's not closed. That's something I didn't realize until recently, and the RCMP is still working this case.
They are. In July 2024, the Prince George Serious Crime Unit confirmed the case is still open, and they're still asking for help. Corporal Jennifer Cooper said, "We know someone knows what happened to the Jack family. It's time to come forward."
Exactly. And Corporal Cooper went on to say, "No tip is too small." That's something the RCMP has repeated for years now. They're still listening. Maybe the tipster can just call Crime Stoppers and leave an anonymous tip. He owes the family that much if it is true about what he said.
Leah, before we wrap up, can you share the most accurate description we have of the man who picked them up?
Yes. He was described as Caucasian, between 6 feet and 6 feet 6 inches tall, with reddish-brown hair, a short, full beard and mustache. His hair went to the bottom of his ears and was parted on one side. At the time, in 1989, he was believed to be 35 to 40 years old, weighing between 200 to 275 pounds. He was wearing a baseball cap, a red checkered work shirt, faded blue jeans, a waist-length blue nylon jacket, and work boots with leather fringes over the toes.
And the vehicle?
A dark-colored 4-wheel drive vehicle, described as either a pickup truck or a van with a canopy on the back. That vehicle was last seen at around 1:30 a.m. on August 2nd, 1989, parked outside the family's home on Strathcona Avenue in Prince George.
Do we have the file number?
Yes, it's RCMP case 1989-25284. If anyone has information, they can call the Prince George RCMP non-emergency line at 250561330 or leave an anonymous tip with Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. You can also visit canadasmissing.ca to review the case online.
And then there's that phone call. The one in January 1995. Someone phoned in to say the Jack family was buried at the south end of a ranch, but the name was unintelligible.
The RCMP traced the call to a home in Stony Creek where a party had been held. Officers had actually visited the house earlier that day, before they even knew that was where the call came from.
They interviewed everyone who was there, but here's what's never been clear. Were those people ever treated as suspects? Were there second interviews, polygraphs, follow-up surveillance?
There's no public record of any of that. That call remains one of the biggest what-ifs in the entire investigation.
And the voice on the line? They've never been identified.
Just 10 seconds. One sentence. He never called back to clarify the name of the place.
Thanks for joining us for Northern Dark, True Canadian Crime.
Thank you for listening.
Next time, we stay in northern British Columbia and look into the heartbreaking disappearance of Ramona Wilson, a 16-year-old Gitxsan girl who went missing in 1994 while hitchhiking near Smithers, British Columbia. Her story is one of the most recognized along the Highway of Tears. We hope to bring you the details next week on this missing young woman. Please follow us on X at NorthernDarkTCC. If you found this episode important, please follow and like the podcast wherever you're listening and share it with friends, family, or on your social media. See you back here for episode 5. Until then, take care of each other.